My name is Michael Carter, and if you've ever lived in a small Midwestern town, you know how everybody seems to know everybody, even if they don't talk much. I grew up in Cedar Falls, Iowa, a place where summer nights smell like fresh-cut grass and the sound of cicadas can lull you to sleep. 4 houses down from mine lived Emma Bennett. Back then, she was just another familiar face in the neighborhood, someone I might wave to while biking past or see carrying in groceries. We weren't close, and to be honest, we didn't have much reason to be. That changed the year our mothers became friends. It started with casual chats over the white picket fence, then afternoon visits that stretched into evenings. I can still picture my mom pulling a fresh apple pie from the oven, the scent of cinnamon filling the kitchen as she set out 2 teacups for her and Mrs. Bennett. The screen door would slap shut, and a moment later, Emma and her mom would step inside. At first, Emma and I exchanged polite hellos. She'd stand by the counter while our moms laughed over family stories, and I'd hover near the fridge pretending to look for something to drink. But slowly, something shifted. Instead of sitting in separate rooms, we started sharing the same couch, commenting on whatever was playing on TV. By the time fall rolled around, I knew the sound of her laugh. Sharp, quick, and often followed by her hand covering her mouth like she didn't want to be caught smiling. I noticed she tapped her foot when she was impatient, and that she hated soggy fries, enough to send them back at a diner. Our family's friendship meant we saw each other at BBQs, church potlucks, and Saturday garage sales. There was a kind of quiet familiarity forming, the sort that sneaks up on you. It wasn't romance, at least not then, but it was the foundation of something I couldn't name yet. Looking back, I think about how those early days felt safe, like the easy warmth of a worn-in flannel shirt. I didn't know it then, but those small moments were laying the groundwork for a connection that would later shake me in ways I couldn't predict. And then came that one family BBQ, when a glance, just a glance, made me realize my feelings for Emma weren't the same as before.
That family barbecue at the Bennett's place still lingers in my memory. The smell of hickory smoke drifted from the grill, and the sound of kids playing tag in the yard mixed with the hum of a country playlist on the portable speaker. Somewhere between passing Emma the potato salad and catching her glance across the table, I felt something shift. It wasn't just neighborly comfort anymore. It was something warmer, sharper, a little dangerous. But feelings have a strange way of arriving at the worst time. Senior year of high school was winding down, and the question of what's next loomed over everything. My friends were talking about majors, dorm assignments, and road trips before move-in day. I wanted something new, something far from the streets I'd known all my life. I ended up choosing Arizona State University, over 800 miles away from Cedar Falls. I told myself it was about chasing independence, learning who I was without the safety net of my hometown. I remember packing my old Ford pickup, my mom crying on the driveway, and Emma standing there with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She stayed closer to home, enrolling at Drake University in Des Moines, barely an hour's drive from our neighborhood. That meant she could swing by her parents' house on weekends, keep her roots deep in the soil we'd both grown up in. Once I left, our worlds started drifting apart in the quietest way. We still had each other on Facebook and Instagram. There were the occasional happy birthday messages, the thumbs up on a picture, maybe a comment on a funny video. But gone were the easy conversations in kitchens and backyards. And then came the pictures. Emma with a tall guy I didn't know, Derek, I later learned. They looked like they fit together in that effortless way couples in their 20s do, all inside jokes and shared playlists. One photo in particular stuck with me, the 2 of them at a county fair, her laughing so hard she had to hold on to his arm. I stared at it longer than I should have, feeling something tighten in my chest. I told myself I had no right to feel that way. We weren't together. We never had been. But logic doesn't stand a chance against the quiet sting of seeing someone you care about in someone else's orbit. In the meantime, I was having my own college experiences. I dated here and there, brief sparks that fizzled as fast as they caught fire. Some ended because we wanted different things. Others ended because my heart just wasn't in it. Looking back, I think I was comparing everyone to Emma without even realizing it. By the time I graduated, I was tired of the heat, the desert dust, and the constant feeling that I was missing something back home. When a job opportunity opened up in Cedar Falls, I took it without hesitation. I didn't know it yet, but going back would put me right in Emma's path again, and it would change everything all over.
Coming back to Cedar Falls after years away felt strange. Familiar streets, but with little changes that made me realize time had kept moving without me. The old hardware store now had a shiny coffee shop next door, and the park where I used to play Little League had new bleachers. It smelled like damp earth and cut grass, the kind of scent that clings to small towns in the spring. I moved into a modest two-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. It was nothing fancy, just clean carpets, a steady water heater, and a balcony where I could watch the sun dip behind the rows of maple trees. There was a comfort in hearing the train whistle at night, a reminder I was home again. Emma was never far from my thoughts, but I didn't expect to run into her so soon. It happened one Saturday morning at Main Street Cafe. I'd stopped in for black coffee and a bacon omelet, and there she was at the corner table, dressed in a tailored navy suit, tapping away on her laptop. The light from the window caught in her hair, and for a second it felt like my mind had played a trick on me, like I was seeing the past and present overlap. When she noticed me, her eyes widened before her smile took over. It wasn't just polite, it was the kind of smile that said, "I remember you." We hugged, the kind of quick embrace that's half nostalgia, half curiosity about what the years have done to each other. She told me she was working as an attorney in Des Moines, handling corporate cases, commuting a couple of times a week. I could hear the pride in her voice, but also see the faint shadows under her eyes, the kind you get from too many late nights. I told her about my job at the local construction firm, how I'd taken on project management after years of working in the field. That conversation flowed easier than I expected. We talked about our families, who'd moved away, who'd stayed. She laughed when I told her my mom still made the same apple pie, and I noticed how her laugh hadn't changed. It still came in quick bursts, followed by her hand covering her mouth. After that day, we started seeing each other more often. Sometimes it was coffee after work, sometimes running into each other at the farmer's market. Each meeting felt like slipping into an old pair of boots, comfortable, but with a few scuffs from the years. Then, about a year later, over coffee at that same cafe, she told me she and Derek had ended things. I'm not proud to admit it, but I felt a spark of hope light up in my chest. It wasn't the polite, surface-level happiness you offer a friend. It was selfish, rooted deep in that old part of me that had never fully let her go. In that moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, life had brought me home for more than just work.
After that day in the cafe, something in me decided not to rush. I'd learned a long time ago that sometimes the best way to grow a connection wasn't to force it, but to let it breathe, like letting a fire catch on its own before you add more wood. I started paying attention to the little things. I remembered how she liked her coffee, medium roast with a splash of oat milk and 1 packet of raw sugar. On mornings when I knew she'd be swamped at the office, I'd stop by and drop one off without making a big deal about it. When I noticed the squeaky hinge on her front gate, I oiled it one afternoon while she was still at work. I didn't leave a note, I just wanted it fixed for her. It wasn't grand gestures, it was the quiet consistency, the kind of attention you can't fake. My friends teased me, saying I was investing, like this was some sort of romantic stock market. But to me, it was about patience, about building something steady, not flashy. Sometimes we'd grab lunch on her break, sitting by the courthouse steps with sandwiches from the deli down the block. Other times, we'd run into each other at the grocery store and end up talking for 20 minutes in the produce aisle, surrounded by apples and the faint smell of cilantro. And every time we talked,
I noticed new layers. She was sharper than I remembered, quicker with her wit, but she also carried a kind of weariness, like the weight of expectations from her career and the image she had to maintain. Sometimes when she laughed, it felt like it was coming from the old Emma I'd known as a teenager. I didn't push. I dropped hints instead, a compliment here, a small act of thoughtfulness there, a text checking in after a long day, not to get a response, but to let her know someone was thinking of her. I thought I was being clever, setting the stage without cornering her. It felt like progress, slow but sure. And somewhere in that stretch of months, I convinced myself that if I just kept showing up, she'd eventually see what I'd seen all along. One quiet Thursday night, after months of this slow build, I decided it was time to finally say what I'd been holding back for years.
It was one of those evenings where the air feels heavy, like the weather can't decide between rain or staying clear. Emma and I were sitting at a small table in her living room, the soft hum of her dishwasher filling the background. She'd just finished telling me about a case she was working on, something about a client who couldn't keep his paperwork straight, and I could see the fatigue in her shoulders, the way she leaned back against the couch cushion. I don't remember what exactly made me decide this is the moment. Maybe it was the quiet, maybe it was the way her eyes softened when she was talking to me, or maybe it was the thought of how many years I'd kept this to myself. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I set my coffee mug down and said, "Emma, I need to tell you something." She looked at me, her expression curious but relaxed. That gave me the courage to keep going. "I don't want to just be your friend. I've felt this way for a long time, and I've been hoping we could be something more." For a second, it was like she didn't process the words. Her eyes blinked slowly, her mouth slightly parted, as if I'd just spoken another language. Then she tilted her head and said, almost confused, "Wait, what?" The pause that followed was deafening. I could hear the tick of the wall clock, the faint drip from her kitchen faucet. Finally, she smiled, small, polite, and apologetic. "Michael, we're better as friends." She didn't raise her voice, didn't soften it too much either. It was final, clear. Before I could say anything else, she picked up her phone from the table, glanced at it, and stood up. "I need to get going early tomorrow, so—" Her voice trailed off as she started gathering her things for the night. I sat there for a moment, staring at the grain of her wooden coffee table, my coffee going cold. My chest felt tight, not in a way that made me want to cry, but in that sinking way when you realize something you'd hoped for has been quietly buried. She walked me to the door, gave a short hug, and that was it. The night ended like a door clicking shut. A few minutes after I sent that laughing emoji, my phone buzzed again. This time, the message read, "When did you stop being a gentleman and caring about me?" I leaned back in my chair, still sweaty from my workout, the cool air from the ceiling fan brushing against my skin. The tone of her words was playful on the surface, but there was something else under it, a strange edge, like she was testing the waters to see how far she could push. I typed back, "Why do you care if I have a woman in my life?" I wanted her to answer that before anything else. Her reply came fast, "I miss you." For a moment, my thumb hovered over the screen. I wasn't sure if I felt surprised, flattered, or just tired. I decided not to let it pass without clarity. "Since when?" I sent back. That's when her tone shifted. She started acting as if my question was some kind of insult. She wrote back saying I'd just stepped away without warning, making it sound like I was the one who had abandoned her. It was surreal, like she'd erased the night she told me we were better as friends, erased the weeks of silence that followed, and was now rewriting the story so I looked like the one who walked out. I reminded her gently, "Emma, you were the one who said we should be friends. I respected that. I wasn't trying to be cruel, just stating the truth." Her response came in a quick burst. "You gave up too easily. A real man would have fought harder." I stared at those words for a long time.
A year ago, they might have set me spiraling, wondering if I really had failed some test of devotion. But now, I just felt detached, like I was looking at an old photo of myself and barely recognizing the guy in it. So I answered plainly, "I'm not interested anymore." The typing bubbles popped up, then disappeared. No reply. For the next week, my phone stayed quiet. And for the first time, that quiet felt like peace.
The days after that night felt strangely quiet. Not just in the way Emma and I stopped talking, but inside me, too. Like a room that had once been full of noise and light was now dim and still. I didn't text her. She didn't text me. The only signs she was still out there came from the little circles at the top of my Instagram feed. Her stories. Often snapshots of late dinners, city lights, and sometimes Derek's familiar face. It stung more than I wanted to admit. Seeing him there, even if it was just an old photo, reminded me that her heart had probably never left that chapter. It made me feel like I had been a placeholder, someone to fill the quiet until she could circle back to what she really wanted. One night, I sat at my kitchen table with the hum of the refrigerator filling the space, and I made a decision. If she only wanted me as a friend, then I would treat her like any other casual acquaintance. No more lingering attention, no more waiting for my phone to light up with her name. Instead, I started turning all that energy inward. I joined a local gym, partly to get in shape, but mostly because I wanted to feel stronger, not for her, but for myself. The first few weeks were brutal. My legs ached after every workout. My arms burned when I carried groceries up the stairs. But little by little, I felt something shift. My reflection in the mirror looked more alert, more alive. I picked up woodworking again, a hobby I'd dropped years ago. My small apartment began to smell like cedar shavings, and the rhythmic sound of sanding boards became its own kind of therapy. On weekends, I'd hike the limestone bluffs along the Cedar River, breathing in the crisp air and letting the silence of the trails replace the silence she'd left behind. I spent more time with friends who actually wanted me around. Friday nights turned into poker games, backyard grilling, or watching football with the guys. I laughed more. Real laughter, not the polite kind you use to fill empty space. It wasn't an overnight transformation. Some mornings I still woke up with that hollow ache, thinking about her. But each day the weight got lighter. My life started feeling like my own again, not something I was putting on pause for the possibility of us. 3 months passed like that. By then, Emma's name rarely crossed my mind. My days were full, my nights restful, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't carrying the question of what if on my shoulders. And that's when it happened, when I least expected it. One evening after a workout, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Emma on Instagram. She'd replied to a short clip I'd posted of myself at the gym. Her words made me pause. "Did you replace me with those girls in the gym?" I stared at the screen, unsure if she was joking, teasing, or trying to stake some claim over me again. Whatever it was, I wasn't about to hand her the upper hand. So I sent back nothing but a laughing emoji. But she didn't stop there.
A full week went by without a single word from Emma. No messages, no likes, nothing. It was the kind of silence that, in the past, would have driven me crazy. But now, it just blended into the background noise of my life, like the hum of the fridge or the ticking of the clock in my kitchen. Then, one night, just as I was finishing up sanding a piece of cedar for a small bookshelf I was building, my phone lit up with her name. The message read, "Is this how you're going to let our friendship die?" I set the phone down on the workbench and stared at it for a moment. Her words made it sound like we were both equally responsible for the distance, like I had somehow walked away from something valuable we shared. But deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't the friendship she missed. This was about control, about the comfort she used to have knowing I was always there. I didn't respond. Silence can be an answer, and in that moment, mine said more than any sentence I could type. About an hour later, the phone buzzed again.
This time, her message was longer. She wrote that when I first confessed my feelings, she'd been holding out hope for getting back together with Derek. She admitted she hadn't really thought about how we would fit as a couple back then. But now, she wrote, I think we should give it a try. I sat back on the stool in my garage, the smell of cedar heavy in the air, and read her words twice. There was no rush of excitement this time, no jolt of adrenaline. Instead, there was a strange calm, almost like my heart was politely declining before my brain had caught up. It didn't feel like she was suddenly in love with me. It felt like her other options hadn't worked out, and she was circling back to the guy who had once waited around for her. I typed slowly, each letter deliberate. Move on. I don't feel the same way I felt back then. I didn't sugarcoat it. I didn't leave a window open. After hitting send, I set the phone face down and picked up my sander again. I knew that if I left even a crack in the door, she'd step through the moment it suited her. I wasn't going to let this turn into a cycle, her reaching out when she felt lonely, me being tempted to respond, and the whole thing starting over again. By the time the bookshelf was done, so was my patience for that chapter of my life.
After I sent that final message, move on, I don't feel the same way I felt back then, there was no immediate reply. My phone stayed dark for the rest of the night, and I didn't bother checking it every few minutes like I might have months earlier. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the blinds in my bedroom, painting thin stripes across the floor. I brewed a pot of coffee, the rich smell filling the kitchen, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel that restless pull to check my notifications. Later that day, while I was on my lunch break, I scrolled through my phone and saw her name still sitting in my messages. I thought about all the times she had reached out when it suited her, about how I'd been ready to drop what I was doing just to respond. I realized I didn't want to live in that loop anymore. So I opened my contacts, tapped her name, and hit block. My thumb hovered for half a second, but only out of habit, not hesitation. Then I went through my social media, Instagram, Facebook, even LinkedIn. One by one, I removed every avenue she could use to pull me back in. It wasn't out of anger. I wasn't slamming the door in rage. I was quietly locking it to protect my peace. That evening, I sat on my balcony with a mug of coffee, watching the sun sink low over the maple trees. The air smelled faintly of rain from an earlier drizzle. I thought about how easy it would have been to let her keep one foot in my life, to answer just to be polite, and how quickly that politeness would have turned into old patterns. I'd learned something important. Sometimes closing the door completely isn't cruel, it's necessary.
In the weeks after I blocked Emma, life settled into a rhythm I hadn't felt in years. Mornings started with the smell of fresh coffee and the hiss of my kettle, not with the anxious glance at my phone. Evenings were filled with small, quiet pleasures, finishing a woodworking project, cooking dinner without rushing, reading a book without my mind wandering. Looking back, I realized this whole chapter with her had given me more than just a story. It had given me clarity. 3 lessons stood out. First, never keep your feelings locked away just because you're afraid of the answer. The night I told Emma how I felt, I got the answer I didn't want, but I got it straight. That hurt, yes, but living with what if for years would have been worse. At least I didn't have to keep carrying that weight in silence. Second, rejection isn't an invitation to chase or prove yourself to someone who has already made up their mind. For months after she walked away, I poured that energy back into myself. I got stronger, healthier, more grounded. And in doing that, I realized something. Your value doesn't come from whether one person notices you. It comes from how you choose to live your own life. Third, timing and genuine interest can't be forced. You can't convince someone to want you. And even if they change their mind later, you're allowed to have moved on. In fact, sometimes it's the healthiest choice. You're not obligated to reopen a door just because someone knocks again. When I think about Emma now, I don't feel anger. I don't feel longing.
I just feel a kind of quiet gratitude. She was part of my life, and that part ended. And in the ending, I found a better beginning for myself. So if you've ever been in a situation where someone only starts caring once you've stopped, know this: you have every right to keep walking. Sometimes the best thing you can give yourself is the peace that comes from not looking back.